Hi, CrabCon folks. Welcome to CrabCon 2025. Can't believe we're here. It's pretty exciting. Christine Sandberg gave me the idea to do a video about the history of CrabCon. So that's what I'm going to do. As the founder of the whole thing, I figured I was the best one to take us through it from start to finish. Or we haven't finished yet, start to the present day and revisit the journey, which has been pretty exciting. And a number of you have been with me from the beginning throughout all of it. Stacy Griffith helped me imagine everything. I consider her a co-founder of CrabCon. So anyway, let's get to it and hear a little bit about how CrabCon started and see some of the images that have been generated through the years. To really do this journey justice and to get it right, we have to start at the very beginning. And the very beginning came in 2016, when I first found one of my crabs was carrying eggs. I was shocked, as this was still in the days of hermit crabs don't breed in captivity. That crab never spawned correctly, but it intrigued me a great deal and gave me a glimmer of an idea that I would want to try personally raising Zoe if I ever got the chance. I began researching everything I could on HCA forums about breeding. Several folks had been successful before me in Germany, including Sue Brown in Australia, but I didn't know of anyone in the US who had been successful. I later learned that Tammy Wyke had gotten 2 species to land in 2008, but she didn't tell anyone, so I didn't know. By 2017, I knew I really wanted to give it a try, and not casually. I tried everything I could to make the saltwater pool as ocean-like and as inviting as possible. And finally, one spawned. I couldn't believe it. I put those Zoe in mason jars like Sue Brown had done. And I kept them until they got to Megalopa. I had a lot of losses, but I did get a few to Megalopa. However, I was unable to get them past that stage, but I was hooked. So in 2018, I designed and built my first homemade makeshift chrysal tank from a 10-gallon aquarium and a 5-gallon plastic water bottle that I sawed roughly in half and siliconed inside the 10-gallon tank. From that first attempt in 2018, I managed to get 2 Cenobita clypeatus to land. I was ecstatic. The highest number brought to land from one spawn to that date had been 24, which was a huge number. And that was pretty unheard of. So I set my sights on the number 24. I would beat that number if it killed me. So I was able to get a second spawn that summer, roughly 30 days after the first. I improved my techniques. I had done more research. And from that spawn, I managed to get 240, 10 times my goal, to land. That was incredible. But at that point, I also panicked a little bit. They were terrifyingly small. They were like ants wearing shells, and not big ants, the tiniest ants. Also, what would I do with 240 crabs? 242. What would they eat? I didn't really know at that point. Would they drown in deeper water? They had been spawned in water. They seemed comfortable with it. They walked out of it, but I didn't know. It was terrifying. How fast would they grow? I didn't know that either. These were all things that most people didn't know, even the scientists. But I did know that I wanted any that survived, if I could keep them alive, to go to folks who were experienced, would help me keep track of their development over time. especially in different conditions, right? Because that could affect their growth, and everyone's habitats are a little bit different. So I didn't want only my methods to be what we use to figure out their growth cycles. So to get that, I knew that any adopters of these very first captive bred babies in any numbers large enough to adopt out would need to be hand selected and approved in advance. There was no way I was going to ship these babies that I had invested so much in. I didn't even know if they could survive it. So I knew the adopters would need to come to me. At the time, I lived in Lockport, New York. Fairly quickly, though, when I started putting feelers out, it was obvious that the people who had so closely followed my journey, supported me along the way, cheered me on, were anxious to be a part of this. They wanted to be some of the first ever keepers of captive bred babies, the first hermit crabs available for adoption with a known birth date. So we would know exactly how old they were. So I had the interest, I had a location, I had a rough idea of a gathering for people to come, but I didn't really know how to proceed. So I had the germ of a plan. But as the very first person to adopt out captive bred crabs, I felt it was very important that I establish a value for them. Who was going to do it if not me? I knew what it had taken to get there. I knew what they were worth. It was probably about $300 a crab, but that seemed a little excessive for something people could buy for $6. So I knew I would have to charge, and I tried to figure out what a good price point would be. And then if they were going to pay that much and travel all that way to come get them in person, maybe they could all do it at the same time and meet each other and get a little something more for their dollar. Wouldn't that be fun? I knew from reading in the HCA that many years before there'd been a hermit crab conference in Virginia Beach, where a handful of folks who had only known one another virtually came together and talked crabs. Some even brought their crabs to that conference. That sounded like fun. I was scared still to take on such a huge task, especially with only a few months to go. But in early 2019, I talked to Stacy Griffith, president of Lycos, and asked her if she would consider helping me plan a hermit crab conference around the adopters getting their captive bred babies. I'm pretty sure I scared her too, but she agreed, and CrabCon was conceived. Still tons of work and planning needed to be done, but we managed to line up a handful of speakers willing to talk on topics of interest. A hotel near my house agreed to host us. I created some baby-specific swag items out of clay and created individual travel tats for the adopters to be able to take their babies home. A few vendors agreed to come, some from as far away as Florida. Ken Light. And a few folks like Trisha Landers from Just Two Old Crabs, who decided to try their hand at making crab foods for the very first time to sell during the conference to help offset their travel costs. So the birth of CrabCon is also the birth of Just Two Old Crabs. Courtney Carr was very interested, but she couldn't leave her business to attend, so she created a video that we could play during the conference as her presentation. And she was one of our very first speaker and our very first virtual speaker. She also donated a bunch of very tiny choya pieces for the babies to go in their travel tats. The opening reception was at my home. People picked out their babies personally in my garage where it was nice and warm in July. Saturday was the main event. That's when all the talks occurred and the shopping. It was all in the same big room. We had not a lot of space to work with, so we just did everything in the same space. And it was so amazing to meet everyone in person. I vividly remember Samantha Denius walking up and just breaking into tears when she saw the babies and giving me a hug. And she wasn't the only one. We were all emotional. It was a really, really special first CrabCon, and it made us want to do it again. Shortly after the conclusion of that very first CrabCon in 2019, second weekend in July, as it's always been ever since that first one, my crabs bred again. And then they spawned in August, and I was off to the races again. Even more females had eggs that year than the year before. Signed a larger double chrysal and a 20-gallon long tank with two round drums in it, with the goal of beating my previous record of 240. Two spawns throughout that summer. I was keeping them alive in whatever I could. Many long hours, and about a month later, I had gotten more than 700 crabs to land. That was phenomenal. It just about killed me, but I was so excited. And since CrabCon 2019 had been such a hit and so much fun, and now there were so many more baby crabs available, I had even bigger plans for CrabCon 2020. I rebooked the same hotel, hired a caterer, arranged with a local winery to supply the opening reception, bought the canvas bags, lined up speakers, and COVID hit. It hit hard, as we all know. Everything locked down in March. But it was only going to be for 2 weeks, right? So we kept our plans active. Then March turned into April, and we were still locked down. By late April, it still wasn't looking good, but I remained convinced that surely by July it would all have passed and we could still gather in person. By early May, things were looking even more grim, so I canceled the caterer, got a refund from the hotel, and wondered how we could possibly continue this. With all those baby crabs, it felt pretty urgent to figure out a way to keep the momentum going. In that early May timeframe, I attended an online pottery workshop at Hopin and thought, I wonder if we could use this platform for a virtual CrabCon. We threw ourselves into figuring out the platform, had the vendors all ship me their swag so that I could assemble it and ship it out. Got some speaker talks lined up. It also opened up CrabCon to our friends all over the world, which was amazing and made us a truly international conference. But that was the second birth for CrabCon, a rebirth, if you will. Now it had become a virtual presence that anyone with an internet connection could attend. In 2021, my husband and I decided to move from Western New York to Southwest Virginia, a trip of about 600 miles. We ferried furniture and crab supplies to Virginia during most of May and made the final move on Memorial Day weekend, toting 750 crabs, counting all those babies, a dozen plants, 2 fish, and 1 skeptical dog with us. We stayed in a hotel located halfway down and ferried 3 bins of crabs and a 20-gallon tank into the hotel on a rolling luggage cart. I hired a contractor to provide extra support under the floor of my new crab room. However, knowing the toll that moving takes, and with many folks still masking up in 2021, we made the decision that a second virtual conference was our best option. Courtney Carr of Bioactive FX agreed to ship all the swag that year, which was hugely helpful. And that year also featured a special memorial video from Carol Ann Orms about her 45 years living with Jonathan Livingston Crabb, who had died on Valentine's Day of that year. By 2022, most of us were feeling ready for an in-person CrabCon to be revived, but we ended up ultimately putting one more virtual year under our belts and really perfecting the use of the online platform while embracing our international reach, with attendees and speakers joining us from Okinawa, Taiwan, Canada, Indonesia, the Bahamas, Sweden, South Korea, the U.S. Virgin Islands, France, Germany, and Australia. In 2023, we hosted our first ever hybrid CrabCon, with the in-person events taking place in Blacksburg, Virginia, and virtual events streamed all over the world via Hopin, our internet conference platform. The opening reception in Blacksburg was a wonderful event, complete with a delicious cake created by Riddles Cakes, a local cake artist. We enjoyed a blow-off steam dance party event on Saturday at the close of the in-person portion, complete with a special crab conga line that we hope to recreate every year. On Sunday, many stayed at the conference hotel and watched the last day of the conference gathered together in the lobby, loath to leave. Both the vendor space and the church where we aired our talks were donated for use by Paula Bolte, owner of Annie K's Main Street Market and my bestie since high school. We convinced Dr. Tudge to come in person that year, and he delivered the most amazing talk with images of larval hermit crabs, courtesy of American University's electron microscope, and the specimens that were donated by our own hermit house breeders. It took a lot of research and planning to figure out how we could make the conference work both online and in person without paying an exorbitant amount to have someone do that for us. We ultimately hired the church's audiovisual guy to load the pre-recorded talks and record anything that was live, as well as stream it out to our virtual attendees. As always, we went into the new hybrid venture hoping we could pull it all off, but not really knowing for certain if we could. Spoiler, we did. 12 vendors made the trip to sell their wares in person, and we continue to have multiple venues from around the world join our virtual platform, making the CrabCon Expo a glorious spot for one-stop crab shopping, featuring special conference-only items and attendee-only discounts. As wonderful as it was, that year it became obvious that we couldn't host a full hybrid conference every year. It's a full-time job, and all of our CrabCon organizers are volunteers. So we made the decision to alternate between virtual and hybrid events. Virtual-only year, but with an amazing lineup of VIP swag contributions and a host of all new presenters and attendees who joined us for the very first time after increased online promotions reached a whole new group of potential attendees. So, CrabCon 2025 attendees, you have a little idea of the history of how we got here. And you have my undying gratitude for continuing to make this conference relevant, for continuing to give us a platform to educate people on the proper care of hermit crabs, the value of hermit crabs, the scientific understanding of hermit crabs. And you've found a way, you've helped us find a way to continue to bring people together in this community, to continue to share our stories, to share our knowledge, to share our passion for these incredible creatures. And none of this would be possible without all of you. You keep us going. Our VIP supporters have kept us growing and made it so that now we are in a conference venue this year, really and truly doing it upright and continuing to shine a light in the hermit crab world. So thank you.
We always have some kind of struggle. So we figure it out. We have got going to get some more things from that side that should make all this a little bit smoother. He probably won't be able to get back this afternoon, that's what he asked online, but this will work for Dr. Touch, which is free, and a lot of the other, I think there's a few more, I don't know. So the other live people we will have up here are, again, Noah's here, Noah Lockhart, and Dr. Stevenson are here somewhere. So they're next after us, and we'll come up and also answer questions. Noah's the one that I selected perfect grad food for last 2 weeks ago for studying whether they have parasites in their gut. They would be parasites that are not harmful to humans, and she did find some. Yeah.
If they have parasites, can we market that like they did with the tiny turtles so children can no longer operate that? Alan had this idea, and now if he can find something in the food,
the answer is in the food, is what I'm hearing. Are we being sitting online for people with the camera? Can you check that if we're standing in the right spot?
You're standing in a fine spot. You can stand a little further apart. You need your microphone a bit closer.
I need mine closer. Okay. I feel like I'm in my own head. Yeah, what Holly says is we should market the fact that they have parasites so that they'll stop selling them to kids. So just repeating that for folks online because I thought it was brilliant. And then Dr. Tubbs will be online at 3 live here. My thing is really okay. All right. So if you have any questions about the history of crab clubs,
I just wanted to give a shout out to Holly for the watch party last year, and they're doing. She just said they're doing one next year.
nice.
And for Virginia, anyone who's come?
Watch party next year. Everybody's meeting in Holly's house next year. Yeah, we'll just do it there.
It won't be worse.
Right. Exactly. I don't see any questions online. Oh, that's true. We can get that. That's good. It's up. Oh, it is on stage. Yeah. So if there's no questions, we'll let you relax. They've left stuff out for us, which is great. Yeah.
Curious how many, other than the babies, how many crabs do you have?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I think a lot of people would say that, you know, once you get a really big crab attack, 50, maybe.
Wow.
A lot of them are babies.
Maybe you have a room that's dedicated?
I have a crab room. I have a 120-gallon tank with all my purple pictures, and that has a topper. I have a 55-gallon tank dedicated only to babies. I have a 20 tall that's not in use, that's for like brand new babies, because I have to keep them in a kind of stuff and follow. And then I have, if anyone follows Darcy Craft Station, she donated some of her crab. She had that huge, amazing room in 2023. Meredith had brought it up to me. So I have two 90-gallon tanks connected by two very large toppers, I don't know the gallons, and that has all my exotics. Stacy donated some for the breeding program. Stacy Griffith donated brushies to the breeding program, and so I don't always know when there's a spawn in there who it was, but I know it was an exotic. And so the ones you saw last night in the vendor space, if you were here, they're a mystery. They might, they're probably used for Cereus, but I won't know for another year. Yeah, Angela?
You said you have some tanks that are for your babies. Do you have some bigger guys in there with them, or are they strictly just the babies?
Well, that's a good question, because as you know, I did learn that wild caught crabs can sort of teach the babies and encourage them to grow. And so if I have, like I have a one-eyed captive bred who is now a big crab who has been with the big crabs for a long time. I put him, he lost a leg during molt. I put him back in the baby tank to recover, and so sporadically they have interacted with adult crabs. And assuming that the captive bred baby that has been with the wild crab for 3 years has essentially learned everything that the wild crabs would know, then that was transferred.
That's what I'm seeing in the wild, is when I'm seeing the babies come out, is when a lot of the adults go back towards the ocean, so whether they are like pulling them under their wings,
Yeah.
to pull them into the cap.
What
they need to do, where to find the resources.
Yeah. What Angela said, and Angela Sarah, for those who know, she has a crustacean plantation in Key Largo. She has noticed that the babies tend to come to land when the adults are going to breed, and then maybe take them under their wings. Yeah. Got that right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So it sounds like we've come a long way since 2019 with TrackCon. What do you foresee it looking like in TrackCon 2030 or 2035?
By 2035, we will have our tech issues figured out. I might already did. I would like to think that we have more successful life, I think, and we're making an impact on the fishery. Personally, much sooner than 2035, I want to be sitting where you are, enjoying the conference that somebody else is running. So if you have a hankering to run a conference, talk to me. I'll still, help, but I would like to be a participant.
So, part of this, it's very exciting that you have captive bred permit crabs, right? Obviously. I was a marine aquarium enthusiast for many, many years. When I met Karen, I had 4 or 5 tanks. She now has one of my 60s for hermit crabs. And in that environment, there's a lot of research and science. But when I got into the marine aquarium, there was nothing captive bred. Now everything you find in Techno, or almost everything there is captive bred. So obviously, if you're captive breeding hermit crabs, it's not that you want to promote pet stores selling them, especially to children. I understand that concept, and education is key. But obviously, if you can do it, if other people can do it, and it's cheaper to breed them and distribute them than it is to pay some poacher to go out and scavenge them and ship them, right? So obviously, one person, it's a daunting task, but as more people can breed them, if you can get captive bred animals into places where they're more
I can think that it will never be cheaper to captive breed. It won't. They spend a month in the water for very specific things. You have to raise them for a year. At that time, they're about that size. Pet stores aren't gonna wanna sell them for $6, and no breeder is gonna sell them for $6. So we have that kind of in our favor. If everything aligns and somebody figured out a way to do it hands-off, like a puppy mill situation, it's still saving wild crabs. This is the thing that haunts me that I live with, right? Like, ultimately, I don't think hermit crabs should be kept as pets. I'm sorry, we're all enthusiasts, we love them, but ultimately, I think they should be wild. But there's steps to get there, right? And the steps are make people care, which we're all doing actively. Also, the captive breeding makes people care because they're so cute and it's amazing. Wow, they look like that, you know. And then people learn more. They live for 50 years. Wow, we would never keep an elephant in a small. I mean, it has happened, but we're getting over that. So I just think we're on a road that once people care, they won't want to confine them to. Maybe they'll be in zoos with big enclosures. I was working directly with the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado, and they had a huge enclosure planned, and I was going to ship them some really big crabs that I have, like a walkthrough thing, right? They were going to have all sorts of animals, and the hermit crabs used to be roaming free, which was super exciting. They lost their funding, so that's not happening. So I can really big crabs. No, I have somebody, a very one of our breeders. But yeah, you want to get to that too? Like, what are your feelings? I agree with you. Yeah. And we have worked with Josh's Frogs to get captive bred babies out to the rest of the world at the appropriate price. But I agree, the pet stores are never going to want to sell them for that price. Each stores wouldn't be able to get them anymore by the millions and dump them into dumpsters at the end of the season because they didn't sell if they're $50 a piece or more. Yeah, when I had 700, I did work with Josh's Frogs. They vet people a little bit, but they're still a sale. So they can go to anybody. And I saw some really heartbreaking people posting about who knew nothing, who had gotten them from Josh's Frogs. That's part of the heartbreak of changing the industry, man. I cried, right? There's my baby, but I said, you're raising, and that person can't follow instructions, put them in water, like.
I'm sure people do a lot of horrific things, and not, but I worked in a pet store from 18 to just about 20. It's not hermit crabs. Anything the pet store sells, there's an attrition rate, and they accept it because they know if I buy 100 hermit crabs for this price, I can lose 90 of them and still make money. That's the disconnect. Like I said.
For the people streaming, the point was that they buy in bulk, they don't care, you know, if they pay 50 cents per hermit crab and they lose half of them, they don't care. It's volume. Which is really why probably, if anything, we may go through, if I have an excess of people who, you know, I've hit all the adopters in our pool, I would probably look to reptile expos vendors before, you know, those are at least people who are accepting exotic pets. They have a little more knowledge, generally speaking. Having a greater supply than demand is probably a good thing, not from my perspective, it's terrifying, but we'll find out, right? This is also what we're doing by spreading awareness. People are more interested. Things like, oh, I didn't know they lived that long. It's very cool. They walk on a hamster wheel. They swim in the water. Yeah. Sorry.
Kind of wanted to know what your thoughts are about pushing the idea of, and I talked to Matt Walker in this article, that these are challenge tests. And trying to get that word out of, this is more complicated than you think. And I know you said like parrots. For me, I equate it to racing pigeons. My kid's great-grandfather was into racing pigeons. You have to build a whole building lot of veterinary type stuff because you're gonna have to do a lot of it on your own. And you realize there's risks that you could lose your whole flock.
Yeah.
But there's also organizations and groups that you can join. But that's not what parents are doing when they're getting a hermit crab. So I think trying to make people aware, this is a really big mountain.
I like that.
And this is a commitment,
Yeah.
a lifestyle, maybe compared to, again, trying to fight off that starter.
Right, instead of starter pet, challenge pet. I love that. I wonder if that's something that pet stores would agree to. It's so frustrating because if they would admit what they need, they would sell so much more stuff. Right? They could sell everything so much more money, even with volume. Yeah.
I actually have packets that I take with me to the pet stores, and I offer to redo their paint form.
Right.
The corporate ones don't usually want to mess with them, but I say, just put a wheel in there. Just put this in there, you know.
Yeah. Chris says she takes packets to store. A lot of us do.
Just bring out a lot of the great information that's out there, that they need salt and fresh and how often. If a parent gets to see that,
Yeah.
then they're like, you know what, why don't you take this instead?
That's really a language thing. You want to answer that? Well, we've tried to change that mindset from 1998. The pet stores don't care. Pet doesn't care. Pet mart doesn't care. They care about profit. They do the same. They buy them for cheap. If they were trying to sell that crap and tell parents that you need to spend $200 today, you're not going to sell a crap. They're going to run along out the door. So until we change the mindset of the consumer, the staff supporting those pet stores, it's not going to stop. The corporations don't care. It is so. We've been trying since 1990. We've been in touch with Petco. We've been in touch with PetSmart. We call. We do letters. We do email. 2 years ago, Petco reached out to Darcy, and they were going to overhaul their tear sheet. Dead in the water. They would accept it, didn't want to follow through with it. Too complicated, too much information.
At least I'm sure a few of us in the city, because I've seen it on social media, have engaged individual stores and changed behaviors at the managerial level.
Until the manager leaves and the organization office really set back to corporate director.
I just want to put another hope out there that yes, it's frustrating and you're fighting big corporations, but in the world of goldfish and beta fish, the mindset is slowly, surely changing. Just keep doing what you're doing, you will eventually reach the threshold where enough people gain understanding. Work your way so much.
Last year, Illinois was the first state to have a law proposed to ban cage shells for hermit crabs. I have been following legislation closely, but it's still a bit someplace. It's not killed, but it's not often that I can brag on Illinois, but it's my home state and the first state to ban cages shells. That would be amazing. And the goldfish are in that bill also. So there are people out there too listening and trying, but this is a huge mountain for us to climb to tackle the pet trade and the money they make in the pet trade. Like it's corporate greed is a hard thing to combat. Yeah. Yeah. And all you guys are doing too. I mean, I'm in the room. I know a bunch of you guys. You can just social media posts. That stuff all makes a huge difference. Then all people people that you're talking to. Alice and I talked to a family last night that was on their way to Hilton Head, and they were fascinated. Just asking one more question. I didn't have murder crabs, never had let her kids have murder crabs, so it was like, so just like sharing our weirdness sometimes is all it takes.
Randomly pinching people.
I don't have a question. I went to Petco and bought stuff on YouTube. And the girl at the checkout said, "Do you have parrots or something, or big birds?" And I said, "No, just my bird crab." She's like, "That is so great. I'm so glad you know how to take care of bird crabs." She said, "I've tried to change Martha's mind on how to take care of these guys, and they won't do it." She understood.
And there are some employees that are like covertly doing what they can against corporate guidelines, but when they leave the store,
Right, that's corporate, so advocacy helps.
yeah.
You know, absolutely. You hope maybe eventually some of those people stay with the corporation.
And somebody wants to take over running Petco in 6 states, where are you out there?
Yes, to answer your 2035 question, we want to have a celebration that is all better.